wait 1 second.
You're good. I'm gonna do the clap. Okay, so if you could begin by introducing yourself and if you could spell your name out.
Okay. My name is Hannah Painter, Hannah Paynter.
Awesome. So we're going to talk about the eating clubs and the role of the interclub council with the clubs. And so could you introduce, again, like in a full sentence, who you are and what your position is here and also with the interclub council?
Okay. My name is Hannah Painter. I'm the president of Cloister Inn, and this year I am the ICC chair. And the ICC is the interclub council, which is all 11 presidents meeting once a week.
Wow.
What's the role of the ICC chair?
So the ICC chair will lead the meetings. There's actually another position called the ICC co-chair. The idea is a lot of the presidents they very commonly will take on a lot of different activities, and so the idea is to make sure that the meetings go smoothly. We have 2 point people. One of them is from an open club and one of them is from a bigger club or a selective club.
Nice. And what does your role as the president of Cloister look like?
So again, we meet as the officer corps once a week, usually for at least an hour with our club manager. His name is Glenn Gang, and oh God, what did you say? I can just start over.
No, that's good.
Then what was the
thumbs down?
Glenn.
Oh, well, don't do that.
Don't do that. I got so confused. I was like, softer. Am I shouting?
I know. No, it's always good.
Okay. Here, wait. Can you say the question again?
Could you explain your role as president of Cloister?
Sure. So every November we have Cloister's elections, basically, and we elect a president, vice president, social chair, house manager, and treasurer. And this year, 3 out of the 5 of those are women, which is exciting. And basically that core group, we call it the top 5, but we meet with the club manager, who's the real adult in the club, and he basically manages everything that happens in the club, and he's a great resource. So we work with him very closely and meet once a week to talk about our plans, logistics, what do we need to be doing, what can he be doing, and making sure the club is running smoothly and that the membership is happy.
How would you say your role as president here at Cloister varies from that role that you have with the ICC?
I think it's different because as president of Cloister, I'm more working with the people one-on-one. Like I have a personal relationship with every single member in the club, whereas on the ICC level, I'm really just working with those presidents from the other clubs. And so I don't really get to interact with their full memberships. So I take their word for their perspective because they are the elected representative from their club. But that's the main difference. And then also just our initiatives are a little bit different. Whereas at Cloister, I'm trying to make sure that the club is accessible and that all the people are having fun here and that all the events are running smoothly. On the ICC level, we don't have as many events because it's harder to coordinate with 11 people that represent hundreds of people. So basically, while being president of Cloister is more event-based, I'd say, being president of ICC or chair of ICC is more long-term initiative. So what can we work on? How do we get there? And what kind of policies can we put in place to make sure that that doesn't go away when the next presidents are elected.
Neat.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the initiatives that the ICC works on. What are some of the initiatives you guys have going on right now?
So right now we're working on rebranding the Club Admissions Week that happens in February for all the sophomores, and we're trying to kind of take back control over the rhetoric around club admissions. It's become very bigger-centric over the past few years, and the numbers in open clubs have been declining. But it's confusing to the presidents because we all sit at this table every week, and we know that we're all Princeton students and that Princeton did a great job in selecting who comes here, so it's odd that some social groups are being selected over other social groups. So we've been working on how do we make the clubs more accessible, how do we make it clearer to the student body that the experience at all the clubs is actually pretty similar. It doesn't really differentiate the overall experience whether you go into an open or a sign-in club. So we've been working on a pretty in-depth rebrand and changing the process up a little bit just to make it a bit clearer. Other than that, we've been working on share full membership trainings, making sure that we have our best practices squared away as far as keeping people safe. And one new thing that we've been working on is a Title IX policy on the whole street, because as it stands, when these issues come up with students, whether it's between students in your club or between a student in your club and someone outside the club, really it's so case-by-case basis that a lot of the officers don't even know where to start when an issue comes to them. And so we've been working with Reagan Crotty from Title IX and Jackie's representative, Jackie is the representative Cher, and we've even been working with UHS on like what our policies should be so that we're in line with the university's policies. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but trying to make sure that our policy is clear streetwide.
So it sounds like there's a lot of coordination between the university and the clubs. How would you say that relationship goes, and who's your point person?
So it hasn't always been the clearest communication. So I remember when I was a freshman, I was told that the clubs are totally independent from the university and that they have no overlap really. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense because they really should be working together, and otherwise things could be either overlapping in a way that's confusing to students or so separate that it creates an unnecessary divide between students on campus that aren't in clubs and students that are. So this year, I think we've really tried to make that communication a little bit clearer. And so Bryant Blunt is our representative from Otis, and he has been a terrific resource. He really succinctly puts things into perspective about what the university sees of the clubs and what they're hearing about the club. So administrators will reach out to Bryant when something alarming comes up or if there's something that we need to address very quickly. He'll come to a meeting and just kind of lay it out on the table what he's hearing, and we'll settle it right there, which is really helpful. There are some times when in the beginning of the year this year, things were a little bit unclear at the university, and that led to some issues with Frosh Week logistics. So it's definitely not a perfect system, but I think we're working really hard to be on the same page. And like we have these biannual meetings with university representatives, Campus Life VP Rochelle Calhoun is one of them. So that's a great resource, but it is a biannual meeting. So it has to be very intentional the way that we reach out. So.
And you mentioned the Frosh Week debacle. Could you explain what happened there?
Yeah, so what I think is a great initiative of the university is trying to make sure that the programming around freshman orientation is very cohesive and the freshmen are bonding together as they're all going through this transition together. And the clubs are in 100% support of that. As far as the parties that happened during Frosh Week over the weekend when all of the upperclassmen students moved back in was a little bit confusing. So we got direct communication from Bryant that the freshmen have not gotten the appropriate training on alcohol safety, interpersonal safety, and just general like the social life aspect of a college or a university. So they asked us streetwide to not host parties on the Friday. And so we interpreted that and we said, of course not. So Colonial was the only club that was affected by this. So they didn't open and they were on board. And then I think what was the miscommunication was I think they wanted to make sure that freshmen were completing all of their training over the entire weekend without confusion or distraction from the clubs. That message wasn't relayed as clearly. And so obviously it's Frosh Week and it's all the open clubs. So unfortunately, it gives the open clubs a bit of a bad rep as far as our communications with the university, but in general, the whole street was a little bit confused, and so we let in a lot of freshmen to the clubs. All the clubs wristbanded, at least I know for a fact, the Cloister wristbanded people that were over 21. So the alcohol part of it shouldn't have been an issue, but basically we got direct communication from Bryant again on Monday after the weekend had happened, and he requested that the clubs don't open to freshmen. So we did that, and I think from what I saw that night and the feedback that I got from people that were out on Monday night, they said that it was actually really fun. I talked to some RCAs that said actually that the freshmen were relieved because their programming is so extensive and a lot of them are exhausted from these really long days of an influx of information. So I think while it was a bit stressful in the moment and confusing because we weren't sure what the university wanted from us, and we just wanted to have a fun time with everyone coming back from summer travels and whatever they were doing. So it was a little bit stressful in that moment, but I think now that we've addressed what happened and what they want from us, I think their requests aren't so ridiculous, and everyone on the street was on board once that was cleared up. So.
Speaking of requests from the university,
Mm-hmm.
we're going to transition a little bit and talk about a referendum that was passed in, I believe, the spring of 2017. Could you tell us what this referendum was, what it asked for, and when you found out about it?
Okay, so I remember, the spring of 2017, I was a sophomore, so I remember a lot of excitement about this referendum because a couple of them had gone through that the students were really passionate about. And since that time of spring of 2017 to the time when I was elected president of Cloister, which is the fall of 2018, fall of 2017, to when I became ICC chair in March or April of 2018, a lot of time had passed for me. So that buzz of excitement and enthusiasm around those referenda for me had fallen a little bit to the wayside. I wasn't in any groups that were specifically talking about them. And so when I came into the ICC chair position, those referenda were not on my initiative list, if I'm honest. And recently this fall, the Prince has reached out to us a couple of times about our responses to those referenda and why we hadn't acted on them, because one of them asked for the clubs to release their demographic information, and the clubs hadn't done so. And so I was put in a little bit of a tough position because, if I'm honest, one of our overarching basically initiatives or goals really for this year of all the club presidents was to make the clubs more accessible and remove some of this mysteriousness that circles around the clubs. And so when I first heard about this referenda that we weren't meeting, I immediately turned to all the presidents and said, well, why haven't we done this? Like, should we send out our information? Should we survey? Because the clubs don't collect those demographic pieces of information when they enroll in the clubs. And so we were talking about how we would go about it and how it's problematic to just ask to just give out the rosters to like the press or to publish our rosters because of privacy, and it's just an odd thing to have floating out on the web. So that didn't go very well. And then secondly, we were like, well, we could survey our clubs and ask them to give their own demographic information and people could opt out. But then we thought, well, if people can opt out, then the clubs might not be shown in as much of an accurate light. And so we kind of went back to the Prince and said, well, we can't really release you our rosters and we don't have the demographic information to give you. So unfortunately, that kind of fell through. And I met with a couple of people from the university this past Thursday night and Friday morning, not back to back. We had a GICC meeting on Thursday night, which is graduate board. So every club has a graduate board and their chairs all come and meet with the presidents basically. And then the next morning, it was a smaller meeting with our GICC advisor, the ICC advisor, myself, a USG representative, and 2 representatives from student life at the university. And so at both of those meetings, we talked about what we can do about that kind of an issue. And the university actually has all of the demographics, and they know, and they said that they could work with us so that they can give us these trends of demographics. So it wouldn't be so much of, oh, a direct percentage of how many people in the clubs are such race or this gender, but more, this is your club generally, and this is how you compare to the other open clubs, this is how you compare to the bigger clubs. So you couldn't do a club by club comparison, but they were saying that it's possible for the clubs to do more of a yourself to the other clubs comparison. So I think that's a really cool direction, and I learned about it on Friday, yesterday. So I think that'd be...
You can pause it for a sec,
Yeah.
and we're gonna have to